Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Alex Yarrow. He is an executive coach, mediator, and trainer working at the intersection of emotional intelligence and conflict resolution. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thank you very much for having me, Jay. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Alex. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll learn from you about how one can transform workplace conflicts into opportunities. But before that, let's understand a bit about you, about your journey, your background, so that the listeners know a bit more about who they are listening to.
Sure. So I actually was born in Ukraine and I came to the US as an immigrant with my parents and I didn't speak English. And so I got into quite a bit of conflict unintentionally just because I didn't know the culture, the American culture. And so I had to figure it out. And as I was doing that, I think I started encoding different rules in my brain for how America works and how come some people get along and other people don't get along. And that led me to be really interested in negotiating at first. And then became a mediator because I wanted to help people to solve conflicts. And eventually then became a coach, now working with executives to help them lead people and transform their conflicts into opportunities.
Right, right. Everyone wants a peaceful life, Alex. Why did you wade into this, conflicts thing? Help us understand that part first.
Yeah. So even when I was a kid, growing up, I was trying to understand how come there are some kids who get along and there are some kids who don't. And I really try to observe it. I also remember reading a lot of Sherlock Holmes, when I was a kid, and I was fascinated by how he could tell from the clay on someone's shoes about where the person was from. And I think I wound up developing that type of brain structure, or that type of sensitivity around conflict. So you could tell me a conflict that you have with someone, and I could have a good sense of where they're coming from. And then I could give you perhaps some ideas about how to resolve it.
Right. Now, why do conflicts happen? It's a very boring question, very basic, but I want to understand your mind on this. Why do conflicts happen? Help us understand that first.
Sure. So let's imagine that, you're in the world and you have a certain bubble around you, which is your sphere of influence. And everyone else has also their own bubble of influence. So sometimes that bubble can be quite physical, like being stuck on a train near someone, or sometimes it can be expressed in terms of money or status or other kinds of things. And so as human beings, the way that our brains are programmed, we tend to want to increase our bubble. We tend to want to increase our wealth. We tend to want to increase our influence. It's just a natural order of things. But of course, other people have their own bubbles. They want to do the same thing. And so when we interact, then our bubbles collide. And it's that friction of the bubbles touching, in my mind, that's how I think of it, is that is what causes conflict. So conflict is not something that's necessarily bad, caused by the other person doing something wrong. It's just caused by two people rubbing up against each other in this, in the course of life.
Right. Is that all about conflicts? Some people might love conflicts. They will pull you into conflicts and want to, just you'd say that makes them feel good. Some powerful people, less powerful, getting how does that? Because in corporates also, people are people, and people have minds, and some cannot be those normal minds. So I want to understand that part. Doesn't that become a big, you can say, barrier in resolution? How do you look at those conflicts?
Yeah. So I think that people get habituated. So people are used to being in conflict for whatever reason, and they think of that as being the normal circumstance of life. And maybe for some people it is. It doesn't have to be. And I think there is, in my mind, if you go through life avoiding conflicts at all costs, I don't think that's particularly good. I don't think it's not good if you go through your life thinking of every interaction as being conflict driven. That also is not good. And the reason it's not good is because your body produces cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is very necessary in short bursts for fight or flight, for survival. But if every interaction is like that, then that cortisol also wears out your body, and it creates health problems long term. So I wouldn't avoid cortisol in general, and I also wouldn't try to have every interaction for it to be cortisol producing. So, but some people get habituated to that, and because of that, then they think of that as normal. And I work with quite a few people like that. People in business are clients around that. And so my job is to help them understand that you could do things in different ways other than just conflict and drama.
Right. So let's look at the corporate environment mainly, where, if I understand, you do a lot of work.
Mm.
As they say, choose your fights carefully. Do we need to also choose our conflicts carefully, or how do we do that? Is there a way
Yeah.
to look at those?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I wouldn't say that we need to choose our conflicts carefully. What I would say is that we need to choose our interactions or responses carefully, because those can be then conflicts or not, or whatever you want them to be. So, for example, let's say that you are applying for a job and someone is asking you a question which is challenging. Let's say, tell me about a time that something didn't work out or you failed or something. So that's a challenging question. And the response can either be getting into conflict, like, I don't have such things, etc. Or it can be, oh, that's a really good question. Let me answer it this way. So that you're working with the person to really address the question they have, even though they may not have asked it in the best way. So part of what I do for my clients and when I teach courses is teach people how to sense that, anticipate that, and actually think through what is the best response before it leaves their mouth.
Right, right. So every question, every conflict is not about interviews. When
Okay.
the
Yeah.
interests are bigger, when
Okay.
there is so much of money involved, especially in corporate,
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
and and that is because nobody wants to lose that money. It's all about, then it
Yep.
does not become about right and wrong. It all becomes about money. Do we still consider that as conflict, or do we consider as somebody encroaching on your rights and that you need to fight? You also know that you are not a big corporate. You will not be able to sustain it. You will have to look at it differently. So are conflict resolutions about being pragmatic about things, or are conflict resolutions about being right and wrong, also about justice? Because it in several cases can also lead to court and all.
Okay. So when I talk to my clients, I would say set the idea of justice aside, because justice is maybe you go to court and maybe you get a third party to say what is right and what is wrong. It's a very subjective feeling. And the idea of justice is usually evoked only when someone feels unjustly treated. I've never heard anyone say, this was so unjust, but in my favor, so I'm okay. So everyone always thinks when they got what they wanted, now the world makes sense, right? Right. So I set that aside. But I think your question about money is a great question. And in a negotiation, there are always two parts. There is the money part, and then there is the price, right? And then there's the terms. So what does money actually mean, and what do you actually want, and when do you want it? So many people equate money with something to fight for. And so, they have and it doesn't matter how rich they are. And sometimes people who are quite wealthy, who you would say maybe don't need the money, fight the most for it because it's their language and it is what they do. And the problem is that if you only focus on the money, then you lose a lot of opportunity for creative problem solving. So you can still have conflict, and a conflict has always two parts. There's the part that's win-win and the part that's win-lose sometimes. So when it comes to money, if we're only going to argue about $1, whether we get 50 cents each or 49, 51, it's going to be a real problem. But if we ask ourselves, what do you want your 49 cents for, or 51 cents? Do you want it now? Can I pay you 25 cents now and then 26 cents later? And if you're okay with that, then we can have a lot of creative solutions to a money problem. But we have to get the person away from thinking of money as justice and actually thinking more about what they want, what would actually make them happy.
Right. What would actually make them happy? Now, do you see when you coach a lot of this your clients are entrepreneurs, corporates, non-profit
Yep.
leaders, and all. But
Yep.
let's look at the corporate way.
Okay.
Several corporates have that whole tussle about things, either product, service, the advertisements and all.
Uh-huh.
When we look at such conflicts, these organizations have very smart people,
Uh-huh.
intelligent people,
Uh-huh.
who are leading these organizations, and they have great intellect also to solve
Yep.
those conflicts. But in many cases, you see, Alex, that these conflicts lead to no resolution, and then many a times it leads to arbitration, and then, they believe that there it will be much more easier for them to understand each other's point of view, and
Yep.
then many a times it leads to a court case also. I don't know what the process is, different places it's
Right.
different. Why is it that so intelligent people are not able to resolve or understand about bubbles, that their bubble is colliding with somebody else's bubble?
Right.
My right ends where somebody else's freedom begins. Why
Yep.
don't they understand it? Why do intelligent people also get so blindsided?
All right. So I can give you a very self-serving answer because they haven't taken my course. That's why. But aside from that, so when we're talking about corporations, there are several forces at play. One is a rational decision of how do we maximize shareholder value, and maybe the way to do it is to fight the case in court so that we may lose this time, but we'll send a message to other people: don't sue us because this is what we will do. So sometimes there's a rational reason why someone may decide to take a chance on courts rather than negotiate something in private. But often, this is more, I think, answer to your question. Why do intelligent people don't think of a creative way of exiting the conflict? It is because they get emotionally vested in winning, or they get emotionally vested in not losing and showing their boss that they're not someone who's going to lose. And so they are protracting the conflict because it gives them a chance to perform for the audience. And the audience might be maybe the chairman of the board, or the audience might be, or the board itself, or the audience might be their boss, or some other person they perceive to be judging their performance, which is something other than what an owner would do if they were in charge of the negotiation. That's called the agency problem, and it happens all the time.
Happens all the time. So, in a way, if I can use the word corporate bullying is very common. Sometimes it looks like. So, when a thing like that happens, when do you come into the picture? What is the best time for you to come into the picture? Before the conflict, after the conflict, after things are, when it has led to a lot of, mudslinging as well as fisticuffs.
Yeah. The best time from my perspective is early on, so I could help the person gain the skills to assess what they want and not make any unforced errors. But in reality, what often happens is that I get called in at the last minute when things are broken. And then my job then is to firefight, is to calm people down, is to help them understand what's happening, stop them from digging a deeper hole, and then figuring out what they might do and how they might exit from the situation. This has happened more than once, I can tell you.
More than once. So you must be having certain no-go areas. What are the conflicts, if I can understand, are no-go areas for you? Don't wade into those conflicts.
I think certainly I don't do personal divorce conflicts. That's just not an area of expertise for me. That's sort of one. But I think maybe your question is within the corporate arena. I think if I suspect that I am not being used for my true services. So for example, if I am hired and the organization really doesn't want to do anything different, they just want to be able to say, oh, look, we hired a mediator or we hired a coach, and even now things aren't working. And I get that sense pretty quickly. Then that's not a contract that I want to have, because it's going to be futile, because they will, I've learned from experience that if they aren't interested in actually a solution, then it's doesn't matter how much they pay. It's just not going to be a productive use of anyone's time. So that's one. I think another one is if the business itself is an unethical business, and I don't believe in the business itself of whatever the corporation is doing, then I'd rather stay away, because I just don't want to be associated with something that that later on someone can ask me a question, and if my sense is that I won't want to give them an answer, or then I probably shouldn't take the business. I think those are the two. I think beyond that, I will work with anyone who genuinely wants to try at least to have a solution. Whether or not they can get there or not is a different story, but I'm willing to make every effort to help them if they genuinely want to try.
Right. Have you ever come to a position, especially in corporate conflicts, where you have met both the parties at the same time and you have become almost like an arbitrator? Has it ever happened?
Oh, yeah, it happens a lot. But I don't like to take the position of arbitrator. An arbitrator in my business is someone who makes a decision, like a private judge, where I would say, you're right, you get the money, or you don't get the money, etc. That's not the role that I want. The role that I want is that of a mediator, where I don't actually make a decision for the parties, but I help them figure out what their solution ought to be.
Right. So, someone who is dealing with a conflict, how would you like to, tell them about the conflict? How should they understand what this conflict is all about? Because when you are too close into it, you
Yep.
just forget. You are so, it's almost like embedded in the conflict itself. And it's very difficult then to see the situation. What would you like to advise such people who are
Yeah.
into this?
Yeah. So when I meet people like that, I usually schedule several one-on-one sessions with each party separately. And then what I want to do is understand their perspective. I want to understand the story from the very beginning. And often the beginning is different for each party. So someone thinks the beginning is when the case went to court, or the beginning is when someone sent an email or something like that. And to another party, the beginning is when someone started working together, or the beginning is when I heard about them from someone else. So that sometimes people have very different perceptions of the past that they come into. And so I want to understand that fact pattern and why it's different. I want to hear their complaint. I want to hear when things went wrong and what happened from their perspective. And during that time, my job is to understand and also to build trust. So they at least know that there's one person who at least understands where they are coming from. And I don't agree or disagree. I just tell them, this is what I'm hearing you say. And then they sometimes say, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this one other important thing, and so on and so on. And we build a story. So they build a story of what happened. And I do the same thing for the other party, or sometimes there were three parties. So I do it 3 times. And so I want to understand from each person involved what is happening. And the stories are very different often. And they only culminate in this, situation where there's a misunderstanding and so on. And so once that happens, and I have sort of a sense of what I think is going on, then I go back to each person for the second time with the knowledge that I have and with permission from the other people to speak about their perspectives. I go back and I say, what about this perspective? And what about that perspective? And have you thought of this? And did you know that? And of course, all of that, and this is really important, the other people have to give their permission to say, yes, you're allowed to say that, or they can say this, there's something that you can't say. This is just for your ears, and I have to honor that as well. So, but most of the time they're okay with me speaking about it if it serves the conflict resolution. So I do that. And then after I've built trust, I challenge them to see a different perspective. And often people are able to do that once they know that at least I understand their perspective. That gives me a lot of ability to do that. And when I do that enough times, I then have everyone join for a joint session where everyone is present. And then I lead that discussion. And those discussions then tend to go a lot smoother because people know what they're going to do. They feel trust with me, and they allow me to guide it, hopefully toward a resolution.
Right. What can be the biggest hindrance in a conflict resolution?
So one big hindrance is people not knowing what they want. They don't have a good sense of what is a good deal. And if they don't have that sense, then how could they know when it's time to say yes? And I try to guard against that by asking them those questions. What kind of a deal would you accept? And what would be the factors that would cause you to say no? And what are no deal triggers for you, et cetera. So I try to avoid that. That's one. Another one, of course, is bad faith that I really try to avoid. And bad faith is when they really don't want to do it, even though they tell me they do. That's another one. I think a third one is sometimes that there are external players in the system who aren't part of the actual conflict who wind up causing trouble. And so I try to get access to everyone so that I want to make sure that there are no people hovering above with whom I haven't spoken who can cause trouble. I think on occasion, I think that happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That those are the ones who are actually guiding everything. That can be a lot troublesome. But in terms of, this all these conflicts, have you seen these conflicts getting over, resolution reached, and people finding more opportunities within the two conflict sides, becoming friends? Have you seen that?
Absolutely, it happens. It happens often because sometimes people were friends before, then something happened, there was a misunderstanding, and now there are a lot of hurt feelings. And so hurt feelings aren't necessarily bad from my perspective because it means that there is skin in the game. They both want to heal. And if I can help them to have a conversation and to offer apologies, and sometimes people they tell me a lot, oh, this person owes me an apology. And so then I ask them a question, what do you want them to apologize for? What's their wrongdoing? And so we talk a lot about that. And once I understand it, then I can go to the other person and I can say, this person is asking for an apology because they feel wronged in this way. And we have a lot of those other conversations with the other person about, is that true? And we negotiate. Well, I'm not willing to apologize for this, but I'm willing to apologize for that. So once we uncover that, and then we have that discussion and people get that apology in real life, where I say to someone, okay, now it's your turn to say what we talked about. And it doesn't matter if they read from a script, as long as it's genuine and it's really their words, people feel a lot of relief. A lot of conflict is around wanting acknowledgement and not getting it. And if they can get that acknowledgement and also, of course, give it, then people then they sometimes resume their friendship, and the friendship can be even stronger because they've gone through something like this.
Absolutely. What are the biggest challenges that you face in the type of work that you do, Alex? Because it's not an easy job. You have to, people expect a resolution. As you said, people have a lot of expectations. Maybe you are their best bet and last chance.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a couple of things. So one is I'm brought in too late. That's one challenge. And as a mediator, it is also challenging because if two people are not getting along, then it is that much more difficult for them to say to each other, we are not getting along, but let's look for someone like Alex to bring him in, and hopefully he can help us. I mean, if they can do that, they can probably do other things that will help them resolve the conflict. So often it is their boss, it is someone else who is not part of this conflict who says, okay, you go in and now you have to mediate. And what I wind up doing is having to build trust with people who don't necessarily trust me at the beginning because I was brought in by someone else. So that's one challenge. And then I think another challenge that happens is when people don't trust each other and they're not willing to trust each other, and they feel triggered by the conflict. It activated something in them where they felt betrayed, maybe not by this person, by some other person, and they're taking it out on this person. And so then there's this phantom person whom they're actually trying to hurt, who is not in the room, and this is someone who's in their life maybe 20 years ago. That also happens.
Absolutely. There's much to learn and understand from you about all these things, Alex. And I'm sure a lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs would want to know more from you, about you, want to engage you, because conflicts are a part of our life, especially in the business life. For those people who would want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I think they should check out my website, conflictyes.com. There's a way to contact me there. Just go on that form, click contact. I get those messages, and I return every message that comes. I see it.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.